Okay, we just finished antibody number 1, or professional resilience skill number 1, which is self-regulation. And I'm going to say that all resilience is constellated around that capacity. That I don't believe you could be resilient without the ability to regulate an autonomic nervous system. That's my bias after 20 years of research and studying this. And it is essential for all the rest of these skills, which I'm about to walk through with you for the rest of our time together. I'm going to show you 4 other skills, but how those 4 other skills are dependent upon and recursively utilizing self-regulation to advance them. So that the self-regulation is head and shoulders the single most important. So if you only focus on one of these, then it's on developing the self-regulatory capacity to interrupt your threat response. That is what is associated with well-being. That is post-traumatic growth and health. It's just everything. It truly is just everything. Except when we were developing this one was slow and kind of evolving. I originally called it self-validation. But as it has evolved, what I discovered when I was doing the treatment, it didn't really come out so much in the ARP initially, but in 1998, 1999, when I was treating lots of people that had serious symptoms of compassion fatigue, a lot of those folks came to Tallahassee and did a week-long of work around resolving their 3 years of working with the Murrah Building bombing survivors. Psychiatrists, psychologists, chaplains, police, law enforcement, fire, EMS, a lot of folks, probably close to 20. I'm not sure exactly the number, but there were a lot of folks that over a year-long period that came in and spent a week with me. And sitting across from those folks that had compassion fatigue, one of the things that I started discovering from them as they shared with me their narratives and what was going on with their lives was that 2 things was happening with them that I didn't know before. One was that mission is a casualty of compassion fatigue. When somebody is surviving every moment of their professional life, they're not very connected to their mission is not the central focus. Surviving that day is. And you see that the more symptomatic, what I discovered was the more symptomatic that people were with compassion fatigue, the further and further and further they were living from their mission. The thing which drove them into this field in the beginning is that it becomes divorced casualty. And as folks begin to self-regulate, then what starts happening is that mission experiences rebirth. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch that rekindle in somebody's life, that they've lost it and then it comes back and they start to perceive that they can work the rest of their career being on fire with their mission, and it's not going to kill them, and that they don't have to use brute force to be able to stay mission driven. That's exciting. The other piece of intentionality that's a little more subtle, but there nonetheless, and I alluded to it earlier, that just everybody that has compassion fatigue, everybody that is suffering from work-related stress, is engaged in multiple ways throughout their day of violating their integrity, acting aggressively or avoidantly, commission or omission, of violating their principles. That, they have an intention of a principle of being compassionate, and somebody says something snarky to them, and they are reactively aggressive back, or they start avoiding their clients, or they become shut down, or they overeat. That a myriad of ways that they act in, that they engage in behaviors that are violations of who and how they want to be. And so that a whole lot of compassion fatigue resilience, professional resilience, is helping people to get back on the track of their mission and of their, what I call, code of honor, the principles that they choose to live by. And that ends up, the really kind of beautiful thing about that is that ends up being de facto resilience. Eric Greeton's the governor of Missouri, ex-Navy SEAL that got in all kinds of trouble and was impeached as the governor, who's now in a process of looking like he's going to be exonerated from that. I've been followed it really closely. I loved his book, and it was really heartbreaking for me to see how much trouble he got into. But he has a quote in that book which really struck a chord in me. He says, the reason why you're suffering is because you don't know what you're doing here. And that is a deep taproot, as you meditate on what that means, is that people that are in service to something greater than them, then they can tolerate a lot of discomfort and hardship, long suffering. That's what mission gives them, is the tolerance for pain in service to this thing that is this purpose and that is greater than them. People who are disconnected from that mission, they get a hangnail and they're overwhelmed. That mission is de facto resilience, grit. Excuse me. So this process of helping people find or reclaim mission, and I was thinking of another great quote from Eric Greeton. He says that missions aren't found, purposes aren't found. You don't find your purpose, you forge it. And that's a really nice frame too. I love that. So I help people to forge their mission or covenant, depending on what you want to call it, and their code of honor, their principles that they want to live by. That's part of what I do in helping people become more resilient. And the marriage of self-regulation and living intentionally is the forward-facing process which I have trademarked. And that is, and it's what's been really cool about that process has diverged or converged or parallel. I'm not even sure how to conceptualize that right now. I never really thought of it. But it's two processes that work equally well as professional resilience, but also as healing trauma. Same thing happens with people who are trauma survivors who have a lot of traumatic stress symptoms. They're in violation of their integrity. And what it takes for them to come into fidelity with their integrity is they got to be able to confront high demand situations with a relaxed body. When they're confronting demand situations in a relaxed body, then they are doing in vivo exposure. They're doing exposure to the trigger, the sensory memory, and a relaxed body. So they're desensitizing the power that their past has over them here in the present. And they're healing their trauma. They are becoming more expressive, more choices, more able to function while having better quality of life. And less and less directed by the experiences of their past, more and more at choice here in the present, as they desensitize those pieces of their past that are causing them to perceive threat here in the present. It's cool. It's cool. It works both ways. It works for resilience. It works for healing trauma. And for those of you that have never are not familiar with my work, I have a book called Forward-Facing Trauma Therapy, where I have put together a model for how to heal trauma without having to go back into trauma memories. How to do trauma treatment all forward-facing, and it's all about living more and more and more intentionally. So, in this process of helping people to live intentional lives, I've discovered a couple of truths. And they're kind of cool. It's simple truths that all a person needs to be intentional in word and deed in every single situation for the rest of their lives. They only need two things. Two things have to be simultaneously present. And when those two things are together in the same place at the same time, then the person who's always intentional, they act exactly the way they want to act. And what are those two things? One is you got to have a relaxed body. Two is you have to have your intention in words. And most people never get their intention to words. Most people live by a set of principles, and they have since they were in grammar school. But they've never made those intentions explicit. They got an inchoate sense, a felt sense of who and how they want to be. But the problem with them staying inchoate is you walk into a situation of high demand, you lose your neocortical functioning, you act out, and then you only know that you've breached after you've breached. And then you go, oh, that's not how I want to be, and you feel the shame, and then you do the same thing over and over again. In order to be proactively intentional, which is intentionality is proactive. It is your ability to walk into situations acting how you want to be. What do you got to have? Well, you need a steering wheel to navigate through that. You got to relax the muscles of your body so you have a neocortex. And then the steering wheel is the words. How do I want to be when people are being critical of me? How do I want to be when I don't have enough money to pay the bills? How do I want to be when my boss wants something from me I don't want to give her? How am I going to act in that situation? Well, what principles do I live by? What are the things how do I want to bring a set of principles to bear here? And now I've got access to all of this internal language because I've made it explicit, and I'm able to now, instead of being mercurial, how often do you get to use that word in conversation? Instead of being, impulsive and mercurial, I get to be intentional and thoughtful. And that, I don't know, that smells a lot like maturation to me. So I kind of have two things I'm going to ask you to do. When I do this as a live training, what I have folks do is I have them actually do some writing. With my clients, I send them home with it's a 9-page worksheet that has them write 2 documents: a covenant, statement of your mission, your purpose, and your code of honor, the principles that guide you in your behavior, putting the points on your moral compass. And I asked them to bring that back to the next session, or over the past 3 months with COVID, next session we share that. And what I do on Zoom is I press the record button, with their permission, of course, while they are reading to me their covenant and their code of honor. And then I ask them to watch what they have, them sharing that mission and that code of honor in a relaxed body with acceptance, compassion, and curiosity. And then what we do in subsequent sessions is I help them to start to find the places that they're in habitual breach of their integrity, and then help them to confront those situations in subsequent weeks with a relaxed body and being able to replace the reactivity of aggression or avoidance with a relaxed body and intentional behavior. And what starts happening is they get excited about the next session because they get to come and share how they successfully repaired this place where they have habitually acted in ways they don't want to be, and start to discover themselves self-efficacious and having self-respect. It's a pretty sweet thing to do. And they're healing their past in real time while they're doing that. So I'm going to invite you to do that writing, or if you would like to do to have the full exercise, then you are welcome to just email me, reference this course, say, Eric, can you send me the worksheet on intentionality? And I'll happily send you the worksheet for the whole part. I've got an abbreviated part because when I do this as a live training, I do it in 12-minute writing and 15-minute small group sharing. Well, obviously, we're not going to do that with a web-based training, computer-based training. But I've thought of a couple of ways to do that. If you want to stop the thing right now and turn in your, well, not right now. Don't stop it right now. But in a few minutes, if you turn in your manual to pages 40, I think is what page it starts on. Yeah, page 40. It is intentionality, and I got a few pages of narrative talking about really what I've just walked through with you doing verbally. And I've got some exercises, which I'm going to back up and do with you here in just a second. But if you want to write out to do the short version of the exercise of articulating a mission and a code of honor in one document, then that's what this is. And there is on page 46 is a practice exercise which I adapted from Stephen Covey's work. And it's 10 unfinished sentences, and you just take 2 minutes to do page 46. And you just say in your head the unfinished sentence, it is my mission to live, and then write down whatever words pop out, and then go on to the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. You'll end up with 20 or 30 or 40 words on page 46. And then go on to page 47 and use those words that you generated on page 46 to answer these two questions. The first one is, why am I alive? What is my purpose here? So the first, you're going to write a couple of sentences to a couple of paragraphs about what is your mission? What's your purpose for the rest of your days? And then for part two, what principles guide my life? What is my code of honor? If you go on to page 48, I have a set of words here that you can pick 5 or 6 of those words and make a sentence about those words. And the way I've kind of come to do it is I always articulate and coach folks to articulate what is the principle and then what is the way that you find yourself in violation of that principle, and write a sentence that looks something like this. I choose to be honest instead of self-deceptive. Self-deception is the way that I mostly breach my integrity about my intention of being honest these days. I choose to be creative instead of perfunctory, instead of rote, mechanical. I choose to be resilient instead of reactive. You know, the way that I breach that. And come up with 5 or 6 sentences that articulate these principles that guide you in your behavior. I always think about it as the points on the moral compass, that I use them to navigate through situations. What principles do I want to bring to bear in this situation right here? Instead of reacting to the situation, I want to reel myself back in, regress to what principles? How do I want to be when this is happening in my environment? Some space between stimulus and response. So I invite you to now stop the video and write if you want to, if you'd like to. If you want to do this later, then that's fine too. And if you chose to stop now and write, then you can start back now and turn in your manual. And I want you to, just to show you what this looks like, we're going to do a shortened version of this process. So what I'm going to ask you to do is on page 43 is that there is a table and it says practice intentionality. And it asks you to pick 3 of those words in the table below that articulate your purpose and or principles while you are at work. Efficient, teachable, helpful, relaxed, undeterred, articulate, fun, thorough, low-key, all of those. And I'm going to ask you to just pick 3 of those and circle them. And then write those words that you circled, 1, 2, 3, in the top row, this grade row in your manual. You may need to print this out. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is to each one of these things, let's say that you chose to be compassionate, tolerant, and a team player. And those are in your top row here. I'm going to ask you to find at least one experience as you think through your work-related experiences, or if you want to expand this into your personal life, that's fine too. At least one, and you can just reference it with 1 or 2 words, of the ways that you find yourself in habitual breach of your intention to be compassionate, tolerant, or a team player. Under these words that you've written. So you got the intention, and then you're identifying some breaches. I'm going to ask you if you want to stop the thing here and fill that table 2 out. Then we'll take a couple minutes to do that, and then come on back. I love that's my friend Bob, who is I'm actually recording this at Arizona Trauma Institute right now, and he's the owner of it. And he says that his mission is to suck a little bit less today than I did yesterday. I think that's a great mission. And I can't remember where I was. I was on the East Coast somewhere. And I really, I usually do a pretty good job of training, like, 80, 85 percentile but I really screwed one day up. And I remember texting him and saying, Bob, I sucked a little more today than I did yesterday. And he wrote me back and said, that's the cool thing about this mission, because now you can suck a little bit less tomorrow than you did today. And I was like, well, that seems like it's cheating. So, I want to show you how this works. And I want to walk through this. I'm going to share an experience from my professional life. And then I'm hoping that filling out that box number 2, that you see how this process works in your own life. So here I am, tooling along, doing my work, being compassionate and modeling self-regulation and intentionality. Doing a fine job of that. And then something happens that I get derailed. And that's always been a really cool metaphor for me. What I see violations of integrity being, it is a derailment, like my train has gotten derailed. Now, what I'm not doing is I'm not calling in the National Transportation and Safety Board to evaluate why I got derailed. And instead what I'm doing is I'm picking up the train and putting it back on the tracks. And I think that's efficient living, is that I just catch myself having violated my integrity. Whoops, that's not how I want to be. Let me do the next right thing, get back on the tracks. And the more that a person catches themselves in violation and puts themselves back on the tracks, the better quality of life that they have. What are some of the ways that I find myself breaching my intention of being compassionate and self-regulatory and intentional in my work life? Well, I find myself dreading particular patients or clients. I find myself being critical and contemptuous of colleagues. I find myself sometimes becoming arrogant and narcissistic. Those are 3 ways that I am in habitual breach of this intention. Do you see that those are almost 180-degree opposite of this intention? Less and less frequently do I do those things. less than 10% of the time. That's pretty good, up from being 90% of the time earlier in my career. Now, the most challenging part of the forward-facing process is this next little piece. Because, if we think about this horizontal line here being time, what I want to help clients to do is back up a few seconds to a few minutes before the action. And what are some of the ways that you breach your integrity? What are some of the ways that you act out? And you'll start to see that all of your breaches of integrity are either commission or omission. And commission is almost always aggression. These two are aggression, are commission, or omission. Commission's aggression, omission is avoidance. And so that's the difference there, is it is involuntary mobilization in the form of either aggression or avoidance. Now, what I coach folks to do, and this takes a little while, it takes me helping them, and it's slow, but hopefully you guys can start to that as you're watching this, you can start to formulate and start to sniff out and become a detective in your own life. There is always something that precedes the violation of integrity. There is always something that you encountered in the world that you saw, heard, felt, tasted, or smelled. Some sensory experience that is similar to painful past learning, that is causing you to perceive a threat. Particular look, particular voice tone, all caps emails, or tweets, particular smells, that, I've worked with a lot of physicians and they find themselves, getting triggered by body odor. Don't like that they do that, but it is a visceral physiological response. And unless they relax their body, they start trying to avoid treating that patient. That there's a whole lot of those out there in the environment that we encounter. And starting to connect these is power for you. So dreading patients, what is the trigger for me? It's this. It's my iPhone. And when I wake up in the morning and I open up my scheduling software, and for today, who do I have a Zoom conference with? And, there are some that I open up and go, that I'm working with that person today. And I can't help but from having that initial kind of dreadful response. Like that comes unbidden. But where I breach my integrity is where I perseverate with it. Where I start thinking about what relative can I kill off and email my client and tell them that I cannot see them today on Zoom because there's been a death in the family and I need to reach out to them and do what I can do to help. Yes, that's a violation of my integrity. And if it gets to be, I've got that person scheduled for a conference at 2:00 and it's 1:58 and I'm sitting with my headphones on, looking at the screen going, please don't show, please don't show, please don't show. I'm in violation of my integrity. Because I want every single person that I ever work with to, when they come on the screen, when they come into my office, I want them to feel a felt sense of appreciation, of welcome, of honorance from me, that I'm excited to see them. And, if I'm carrying dread and I'm faking it, that it's somewhere their mirror neurons are picking that out. And I want that to not be there. So why would I perceive that person's name on am I in danger when I look at that person's name on my scheduling software? Nope. But what does the name have in common with painful past learning? Well, I've had difficult, painful sessions where I've not done a great job of regulating, and I've had painful experiences back there with them, or where they've been critical of me, or where they've been challenging, or whatever else. And I see their name and it's associated with those past experiences. the painful experiences come forward. I perceive that person's name on my phone as a threat. What happens is the energy in my body goes up and my neocortical functioning is going down. And if I don't regulate that, then what's going to happen is I'm going to start to move into involuntary methods to try to get myself out of that, instead of relaxing and walking into it with intention, not in any danger. Relax my body, no distress, and go do good work with them. Contemptuous or critical of colleagues, there's lots of ways that plays out, but ultimately, and I'm loath to admit this, but ultimately is when I see my colleagues get accolades. Yuck. I hate copping to that. But when they publish a new book or they're getting all these kind of, positive stuff from media or whatever else, I'm kind of, there is some part of me that's going grumble. And am I in danger while my colleagues are having experiences of, competence and celebration of their work? No. So why would I perceive that as threatening? Well, there's two levels for me that plays out in, and one of them is how competitive graduate school was, and how that process of, this person getting the instructor's attention and not me, how that felt like I was failing, how I got, how ramped up and jacked up the graduate school process was. And man, it's nothing like residency for physicians. That's even more there. But also, I had two narcissistic parents, and a sister, where there was a lot of competition for any kind of good favor. It was competitive between me and my sister. So she got the accolades, and now I'm being withheld from, and how that was just a really painful process in my development. That's the history of that. Like, none of that's really dangerous in the real world, but that stuff in the past was, man, that it was painful. So when I'm in the situation where you're getting good favor and I'm not, then I perceive that as a threat. So why? Well, I just kind of did that. It's not the triggers the problem, it's the painful past learning. And the trigger is similar to the painful past learning. It's activating my threat response. The energy in my body's going up, the neocortical functioning is going down, and I've reached threshold of where I can no longer hold intention, and survival has trumped. That these are survival. These are fight or flight ways of managing this perception of threat here in the present. So how do you resolve that? Well, it's pretty simple. You confront the trigger, the body odor patient, the name on the scheduling software, the all caps email, the person stealing my lunch, with a relaxed body. And when I do that, check it out. First thing I get, like what I haven't had ever before then, is what I get immediately in 1 second is I get to be in a comfortable body. And that's grace. That's a really cool thing, is that now I'm comfortable. And what's happening in a relaxed body is neocortex rebooting. I'm getting back judgment and fine motor control and intelligence and creativity, and all of my resources are all coming back. And now I'm able to walk into that situation, and I got space between stimulus and response, and I can go, Eric, how do you want to be? How do you want to act when people are being critical of you? When somebody's baiting you to be in conflict with them? When somebody's ridiculing you? How do you want to be? Oh, geez, I don't want to get down there in the mud and roll around with them. You guys have a good day. I'm out of here. Take care. Bye-bye. And, I can just simply leave. Or I can engage them and not participate. I have choice. I'm not avoiding them reactively. I'm avoiding them from choice. And those are two different things. Videotape, they look the same. There's no such thing as videotape anymore. Video recorded, they're the same thing. And the more that I do that, what's also happening is I am desensitizing all of the primary and secondary traumatic stress experiences of my past. So my past is becoming less and less and less intrusive. So the more and more I encounter the situations at work or in my personal life where I have been acting out, the more I confront those situations in a relaxed body, then the more I'm desensitizing the power of the intrusion here into the present. So it becomes simpler, softer, easier for me to stay on the rails of my intention in those situations. So I'm able to confront the trigger, relax body, and I am still compassionate and modeling self-regulation and intentionality. I did a training here 2 weeks ago. There was a bunch of people, 100 people that attended it, and within 20 or 30 minutes, there was a text, some dude texted how bad the training was and how he had signed up for 3 or 4 courses from Arizona Trauma Institute and how horrible job I was doing. And oh my goodness, it just dropped the bottom out of me, and I ended up writing him a letter and, talked to the course about what had happened, because it was in the chat feature and everybody that was participating in the course could see his feedback. And, it was like I felt demoralized from that. Yeah, brings tears to my eyes almost. And I got home that night, and one of the participants in the course had written me an email and said that, oh my God, that guy was a jerk, but you put on a master class of being able to model self-regulation and intentionality in that situation. And I was like, I never saw that. I mean, and I did everything right. I still felt the pain of that. It was like, good God, what did I do? What did I do to create this much vitriol in somebody? But, I got dealt some lemons, and I was able to step to that with intention and not make things worse, and earn the respect of at least one other participant that I had walked my talk. And I told her, thank you for being the voice of my God. I wrote her back and said, thank you for confirming for me that this stuff works. So that's what intentionality is starting to be, so that when a person starts to go to work, stay with me on this. When a person goes to work, and the reason they're going to work today is not for a paycheck. That's the secondary outcome. The primary outcome is that I'm going to work today to fulfill my mission. And you know what? I'm going to use today's work experience as a spiritual gymnasium to be able to become more and more and more intentional. Live my intention, walk my talk. I hope you get this. Then that workplace has completely changed 180 degrees. Because when you're going to work with that intention, your workplace is not a place that hurts you anymore. It's a place that builds you. It strengthens you. It is the opportunity for you to perform your mission, and check it out, they're paying you for it. And that's kind of profound. That we get the privilege to do this work, but we also get to use our opportunity to do this work as an opportunity for us to heal our own lives. And that's what intentionality does. That's when you taking up the mantle of the mission to live your mission in alliance with your principles at work. And what you have to do to be able to consistently do that is you have to confront those situations of high demand and trigger situations with a relaxed body. You are healing the past and becoming fully optimized here in the present. That's really different than just doing self-care. I hope you can appreciate that. So that is the skill of intentionality. One of the things that I'm doing is kind of evolving my work around forward-facing to do individual and group coaching with folks for implementing this in their lives. If that's intriguing for anybody watching this, then please email me at the email that I gave you before, or through the website forward-facing.com, and be happy to talk with you about helping you get skilled up and putting this into practice in your life. Cool. So those are the two primary resilience skills: self-regulation and intentionality. That is the forward-facing process that I have trademarked. Now on to these other skills, one of which we've talked about already that I'm going to finish up here. Take 10 minutes to do it, not very much more time. On perceptual maturation. And this is a quote from Wayne Dyer. Wayne Dyer, D-Y-E-R, Dyer, who just died a couple of years ago. Change the way you look at the things, and the things you look at change. As you change the perception of your environment, then the environment changes. A good example of that is FedEx sign. For those of you that already know this, then it won't be nearly as profound. But some of you have never seen this. Can you find the arrow? Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. Look here between the E and the X. If you have not ever seen that arrow before, what I promise you is that for the rest of your life, your attention will be drawn to that arrow in the FedEx sign. You'll see FedEx trucks go by, and you'll see the arrow first, that it changes the way that you see the sign. It changed that thing into something else. Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. What horse? It's a frog. What frog? It's a horse. Nope. It is a horse frog or a frog horse. That once you get the other, then it becomes both and. That it changed, that perceptual shift changed the thing. Nothing really changed, but it changed the experience for you. And that same principle can be brought to bear in the environment. It helps you to become less reactive and more intentional, to move from an external to an internal locus of control. And as I said before, there are two kind of categories. We have written in the manual, I think it is that I got 13 pages on that. Going from page 50 through page 63. So that's 14 pages. And each one of these little kind of areas have all these, I've got all kinds of little tools for perceptual maturation, and they all have little exercises designed to help you to kind of look at into different applications of perceptual maturation. And I invite you to look at that after a few days of practicing self-regulation, because none of this. I remember doing a training in Vancouver. And when I started talking about perceptual maturation, I remember there was a police psychologist that stood up and yelled F you, except he didn't say F, and threw his manual down and walked out of the training. He was so traumatized and threatened by what I was saying about the evolution of the perception that he only heard that the workplace that works not that there's not that work is easy. And he worked with police, and he had absolutely a victim stance, believing that he and all of the folks that worked at the police department were victims of their job. And it's hard. It's demanding, and you see horrible things. But I am absolutely certain, and I know several of them that are able to do that for 30 years and not be a victim of that. They have grown the capacity to be able to work in law enforcement and not suffer. Yes, pain, but not suffering. And they have rich family lives, and they have a rich spiritual life, and they are able to have integrity with themselves. And a whole lot of that is about the way that they change the perception of their work. But man, somebody who's not regulated, they just can't see it, and they are really threatened and offended by this. So that's why I always kind of say, wait till you self-regulate for a little while, and you have a neocortex that you have a much broader aperture. That if you're still in the threat response, then you got a little tiny aperture, and this is all threatening and I didn't say this earlier in the day. I'm just going to throw this out there. I won't spend any time on it because we're coming up on closure of this process. There are a lot of professional care providers out there, and I'm not saying this just law enforcement, in every caregiving field. There are people who are harvesting secondary gains from being a victim of their work. What secondary gains do you get from being a victim of your work? Well, for one thing, you get sympathy. That's an awful job. How do you do that? How could you stand to do that? How could you be one I can't even understand is how could you be a pediatric oncologist? I've worked with a pediatric nephrologist who looked at me with tears in her eyes. She said, every one of my patients die. Every one of them. How do you do that? Well, you got to grow. There is the victim stance. What's the other secondary gain you get from being a victim? It is a ready-made excuse, permission for indulgence. It was an awful day. I deserve Dairy Queen. Let me go eat 5,000 calories at one sitting. I deserve to have a drink or two. I deserve to smoke a bowl. I deserve to have this affair. It becomes a permission for indulgence and violation of one's integrity. And man, what I'm absolutely certain of, absolutely 100% certain, is you cannot get enough of the secondary gains of being a victim of your work to have quality of life. What produces quality of life and well-being is living with integrity. And the only way to get to that place is that folks find themselves, when I'm doing treatment with them around compassion fatigue, with most folks, we come to a crossroads of where they have to surrender. They have to first uncover, and then we talk about it. And I try to do that in a way that's absolutely non-judgmental, because I had all of those things. I'm just a little further along the line than other folks are usually working with me. But I certainly had a whole lot of those, and still do, to much more micro violations than they were big in my 30s. And that a person has to, if they want to become a resilient professional caregiver, they have to cash in their secondary gains. Like, this is cold comfort. I'm ready for the whole thing. I'm ready to mature as a professional caregiver. And that's one of the more subtle perceptual maturations that has to happen in order to move towards a resilient caregiver, is the relinquishing of entitlement, relinquishing of the secondary gains associated with being a victim of our work. So as Jim and I wrote the book and have worked on this, we've kind of developed it in, it's really two categories. There is, the front end work of perceptual maturation is making the workplace less toxic. And I've been through several of those with you. I think I got one or two more to do with you. And then, which I'm not even going to talk about today, but I have it written about in your manual, is then moving this, as you start to become more and more resilient, is moving this into optimization of being able to enhance your productivity, enhance your relational capacities, to enhance your functioning as a professional. And I've got some mindfulness stuff in there in the manual on that. Some of Sean Akers' work on the science of happiness. Some work on self-validation and how that all plays out. And I've got that all in the manual that you can read. And if any of that's intriguing for and you want to do some more work around it, then reach out to me and I'll be happy to explore some of those options with you. But I do want to take a minute or two here to talk about a couple more of these, and I'll do these last two here. Outcome-driven versus personal best practice. And this is another subtle one, but a big deal. Especially for those that work in hospitals. I mean, Price Gainey, how many of you have had, know what that means, patient satisfaction scores, and how much of your validation as a unit or as a professional is based upon patient satisfaction scores. Something which you are completely powerless over. And people who are immature as professional caregivers, that perceive outcomes that are less than stellar as threatening, because it means that they're going to lose stature or favor from their peers, their supervisor, or whatever else. As we move into maturation, then I think this is a good definition of maturation, is spending less and less time and energy on that which I don't have power to control, and spending more and more time and energy where I have potency, where I can change things, where I am able to put my attention and energy, and it pays dividends. I get results from it. And the more that you are dependent the more you need to be effective with your clients before you can have worth as a professional caregiver, then the more you perceive your clients as threatening, because they are the holders of your worth now. And that you are constantly in a perceived threat around them because they are holding these golden keys to your self-respect and your future, because they are the ones that evaluate you. Once we start moving into resilience, we start going, oh my goodness, what a waste of energy and effort. I am powerless over your perception of me. Completely. So let me stop focusing on that, and let me instead focus on where I have power. What do I have power to do? Well, I have power to give you my absolute best, and to elicit feedback from you on how I can do it better. And so I always think golf is a good metaphor. I'm a lousy golfer and haven't played in 10 years. But the excellence of golf is not about the outcome. It's about the process. What makes a great golfer is a great swing. And when a golfer is golfing, they don't think about the hole when they're playing the game. They line themselves up and then they completely forget about the hole. There is no focus on the outcome when they are mid-swing, that all the attention is on the swing and the ball. And what they know is that if they hit that ball with the best possible swing, it's going to go as close to the hole as they can get. And once that ball's in flight, they don't have any control over any of that, whatever happens. They can only just accept that that's the best that they could do with that hole, and then they walk to the ball, and then they refocus and to the hole again and reline up, and then they hit another shot. And I think that's a really nice metaphor for what mature caregiving looks like, is that we focus on doing the best that we can do in that situation and then let go of the outcomes. And then when we meet with our client again or meet with our patient again, then we evaluate how those outcomes went, and then we make another plan to help them move towards where and how they want to be. And as I continued thinking about it, did this whole process at Barnes Jewish Hospital, and there was a woman that says, that articulated this process really beautifully. She said that my job is to do my best, and my best is good enough, and I'm always doing my best. And even if I'm not doing my best, it was my best because it was the best I could do today. And I thought that was a pretty cool articulation of how this process works. Like, yes, even when I'm screwing up, it's still the best I could do today. Now, I can learn from that screw up and apply that to future situations, but I can't apply the learning that I got from my error behind me. I can only apply it going forward. So I'm going to have a lot of screw ups, and to accept that that's a screw up, extract the learning from it. I did the best I could do. Now I've learned better, and I can do better in future situations. And I'm not walking around like a dog under a newspaper where I'm in constant fear. I'm doing the best that I can. And then the final one that I want to do is adolescent caregivers. You know, all systems that you work in, as I said, are toxic. What makes those environments toxic is that they're all anxious. And all healthcare systems demand more from you than you can give. That's what the managers that went to and got MBAs, that went to business school, learned to do as management, is to demand more from their constituents than they can give. And then you're getting maximal performance from them. What the job, and people who are immature see that as who are still adolescent in their caregiving, they see that as an affront, that they should not demand from me more than I can give, and they're asking too much from me. Well, yeah, that's always going to be that way. That's not going to change. And check it out. Here's some news that is really uncomfortable for folks that have not made that maturational hurdle, is to hear this. Your quality of life is not the mission of your agency. It's just not. Like, it's not focus, nor should it be. That's your job, not your boss's job, for you to have quality of life. And I want to promise you that you are 100% replaceable. That if you die tomorrow, the agency, the institution is going to keep on going and probably forget about you. Sorry. I mean, that's the real world. So when you relax into that And you start seeing, oh, this is what a toxic environment looks like. Is that it's anxious? It's always demanding too much. I can't fulfill that. But you know what? I'm not in any danger when people are wanting more from me than I can give, because you know what? I can only do what I can do. And they can fire me or not fire me. I'm powerless over that. I can't make, all of those clockworks that shift to who they're going to keep or who they're not going to keep and all of that. I can't keep my thumb on managing all that. What I can do is I can do my best. And stay out of the politics of it all, and just accept that the environments that we work in are toxic, are demanding, and I'm going to go into it, and I'm going to do the best I can do, and I'm going to start to build good relationships with the people I work with in the management, and I'm going to create a feedback loop of sharing with them what I perceive, how this can improve, how a workplace can improve, how productivity can improve. They can do what they want with that data. And if it gets too painful, I can quit and find somewhere else. Or I can accept that this is the way it is and build the best quality of life that I can in this context. I think that's maturation. Instead of being jacked up and symptom generating all day long because I can't tolerate the way that the system is. I think, and that, man, that's not resignation and withdrawal. That's social change. But social change requires that I function in the system as it is here now and continue to work for change. If I want to get a paycheck, I can resign. So that's another perceptual piece that folks don't think much about, is that they don't care about me. Well, you're right. They don't. Okay. So your boss doesn't care about you. Okay. Now, how do you want to be in a situation where your boss doesn't care about you? Do you want to stay there, or do you want to go find someplace else? Not continuing to live as a victim in that context. And that is a subtle but really important perceptual shift, that when you shift to, oh, it's not their job to give me positive feedback and accolades and how valuable I am. It is not the agency's job to support my sense of self-worth. That's my job. So let me do that. So those are some of the perceptual maturation pieces. And as I said, there's the personal optimization. Here's what we've discovered in this process, is that this is recursive, is that the more that I self-regulate, the more I have of my neocortex to bring to bear to perceive things differently. So the more I'm able to change perceptions, and the more I change the perceptions of the workplace, the less threatening it is, so the easier it is to self-regulate. And this becomes a wheel of maturation. Is that it's kind of the little by slowly becoming more and more resilient and less a victim of my workplace. So that was skill number 3, perceptual maturation. Now, skill number 4 is connection and support. Now, we've talked about kind of the elements of connection and support, about why and how you need those, and about how valuable that is. For any of you who are familiar with Stephen Porges' work, one of the things that Stephen Porges has taught us over the past 20 years is that human beings are wired, that our brainstems are wired to interrupt the threat response relationally. When I'm seeking and reaching to you to connect with you, and you're simultaneously reaching to connect with me, even if it's through this media, then what happens is that your brainstem behaves differently than if I am perceiving you as a threat and I'm shutting down. then I stay in the threat. But if I'm reaching to you, activating all of what he calls the ventral vagal system, which are all the facial features that I'm reciprocal and you're reciprocal back, and that we're constantly attuning and trying to stay in relationship with each other, mutually respectful. What's happening is that's constantly interrupting the threat response here in the brainstem, diminishing or interrupting its transmission to the body, and it becomes a way of mitigating the threat response and self-regulating relationally. So it's really important that we develop strong, mutually respectful relationships with a network of support, and that we become more and more relational with everyone that we work with, and that we become less and less polar, more and more engaging, not for their sake, for our own. Because the more that we are able to engage relationally with people, especially the ones that we have habitually built polarization with, the more that we can engage with them, then the more the threat response is interrupted and the better we function in that situation. That's resilience. So there are 4 kind of primary ways that we use a support network. One is that we need 1 or 2 people to be our safety net, who are monitoring us, and we have given permission, we have license to confront us if they see us start to get symptomatic. That's one element. Element 2 is that we need a network of folks that we can step to and share the painful parts of our work, so that we are desensitizing and integrating secondary traumatic stress experiences from our work. That we have this network that we can turn to and intentionally share narratives of our painful experiences with them. 3, we need accountability partners to help us stay the course of being intentional, and people that we can step to and tell on ourselves when we are in violation of our integrity, and have them hear our commitment to change. And then 4, we just need social support. We need people that we can hang out with and feel comfortable in the context of them, that are relaxed, and that we can relax around them, that we don't have to be vigilant and guarded. And it's incumbent upon you I can't tell you how many clients that I've had saying, I don't have anybody like that. And I said, well, okay, go find them, engage them. It's your job. It's not the world's job. It's not the community's job to provide for you a cafeteria where you can go kind of pick your support network. You need to go cultivate them. You need to go find people. And let me just give you a hint of how to do that. Meet up. I've met a whole people that are still in my support network, from the hiking and tennis and bicycling groups of meetup. I end up kind of engaging with them. That's really social ways at first, but I've met folks that I've become close to, and have years long connection with them, and that's a really useful tool that are in most communities of finding things that you like to do and going and hanging out and engaging in things that are fun with other people, and you'll start to build those relationships of lifelong connection and support with the network. But here's the thing. Most of you have never thought about, A, it's your responsibility to build that network, and even more importantly, B, it's your responsibility to train those people how to be supportive. That mostly what we do is that we just kind of hope that we get good stuff from our support network, from our friends. And a lot of times it is less than satisfying. That they're busy, and that, that you end up hanging up or leaving lunch, and it's like, I'm glad I saw them, but that didn't feel very good. So it's incumbent upon you to teach your support network how to support you. And in your manual, I have a couple of pages about connection and support on pages 64 and 65. And what I've done is I wrote out a little script of some things that you might want to say in your training of a support network to be supportive. So what I want to ask you to do is to think about 2 or 3 people that you can step to over the next week or so and say to them something like this: hey, I just did this course and I realized that I'm high risk for compassion fatigue, for work-related stress. And one of the things that I learned is that one of the mitigators of that, one of the important skills that I can develop to be less affected by my work is developing and utilizing a support network. And I thought about all the people in my life that you know, one of the things that support network I need to do with those folks is I need to be sharing some of the painful parts of my work with somebody else. And I thought about all the people in my life that I could do that with, and your name was at the top of the list. And I'd be honored if you'd be willing to be one of those people in my life. And if you're willing to be one in my life, then I would certainly be willing to reciprocate and be one in your life. And here's the deal. I won't ever grab you in the hallway. I won't ever just call you and explode, vomit trauma all over you. What I'll do is that I'll call you or email you, and I'll ask you to make yourself, I'll let you know that I've been through something, you know, over the past few weeks, and I need to share about it. And what I'd ask you to do is to make yourself available sometime in the next 48 to 72 hours, if you're able, sometime in the next week, definitely, either by telephone or in person. We can go to lunch. I'll buy you lunch. Or we can talk on the phone. Or in COVID time, we can FaceTime or Zoom. And here's the thing. I'm going to have a narrative prepared. I'm going to have thought about this and share the stuff that I need to share. Now, I won't take more than 20 or 30 minutes of your time to do that. I'll be honest of your time. But during those 20 or 30 minutes that I'm sharing kind of some stuff that I need to get out of me, what I'd ask you to do is not interrupt me. It's to just listen. Now, if when I'm done, if you've got some suggestions or some insights you want to share with me, I would love to hear that, but not in the middle. Let me get out what I need to get out. And if you're willing to do that for me, then I would certainly be willing to do that for you. But don't grab me in the hallway and start, you know, kind of sharing it on the fly. You'll talk to the hand. I will make myself available within 24 to 48 hours, either by telephone or in person. Now, how many of those folks do you need? Well, probably more than 2. You don't want to keep burning out the same people. Probably not many more than 5. So, 3 to 5, somewhere in that neighborhood of folks that you kind of can alternate, and you just build lifelong connections with those folks. And they become, I always think about those 2 men and 3 women in my life as my inner sanctum, as the people that I kind of share my closest stuff with them. And, I can really say that whenever I've had an accomplishment, it was we that did it. Not me, it was we. And that's really the way I look at how important the resource of a support network is. So that's skill 4. And then the final area of resilience is self-care and revitalization. For any of you who have ever been to a compassion fatigue training before, my hunch is that most of that training was self-care. This is a 6-hour training, and we're going to spend about 5 or 10 minutes on self-care and revitalization. It's important. It's important. But man, way down the totem pole, there's other stuff that's much. self-regulation is much more important. But as you kind of are already starting to get, that you don't do a very good job of self-regulating unless you are also doing self-care. It is the fuel that allows you to do that. So these are all in tandem with each other. So if you remember from this morning that I brought this quote forward, that which is to give light must endure burning. And I said in the morning, there was a warning. And what's the warning? The warning is that we're going to burn. And we cannot avoid that burning. And that we need to learn how to burn without being diminished by the burning. Now, the prescription that Victor has for us is a little different, similar but different. What does it take for something to burn? What is required for something to burn and keep burning? What's it need? It needs fuel. And we are built to burn fuel. And if we are intentional and disciplined about refueling ourselves physically with food and exercise and sleep, emotionally with connection with others, professionally with continuing education, spiritually with a relationship with our higher selves or our God or however that looks like, then if we start hitting on all those cylinders, then what happens is that we are continuing to refuel and we are burning fuel, and we build a nice bright light that we're able to illuminate the darknesses of other people's lives, walk into those dark places, find them in there, and illuminate the pathway out without it diminishing us. That's cool. But if you're anything like me, you sometimes get a little bit lazy about maintaining self-care and revitalization. And you find yourself not refueling. You find yourself holed up and eating Oreos in your bed, watching Netflix. Oreos are not fuel. And so what ends up happening? Well, we end up burning ourselves instead of fuel when that happens. It takes me about 3 days of not doing healthy things before the sneer starts crawling up my face and before I start finding myself progressively diminished in my capacity to function and more irritated and way less than optimal. And I need to do some exercise. I need to eat correctly. I need to step to some people and connect with them. I need to evolve myself professionally and reset my spirit. And when I do those things, then I'm reset. Tank's full, and I'm cruising along. And it's like, I got to run out of gas every once in a while to remember how valuable it is to not be in pain, to not be limping and suffering. So, really, I want to say this about self-care. That instead of thinking about it as being self-care, I want you to think more about that second word that I have in there, revitalization. Because self-care ain't bubble baths and chocolate. Sorry, maybe once a year. But a whole lot of people in the field of caregiving have conflated self-care with indulgence. I remember working in New York. There was a woman that when I was early on at St. Paul's, and she was volunteer. She'd be working, and she'd say, "Okay, I got to go uptown for retail therapy," and that she had reached her limit, and she had to go buy some things, and that was her way. That was her way, and I'm not judging her for that. But for me, that I thought for a lot of years that self-care was indulgence. What I have since learned as I've matured a little bit is that self-care is often the opposite of indulgence. It's doing stuff that on the front end I don't want to do, that on the back end, after I've done it, I got some juice. I've got some fuel. I feel better. It's not escape. It is refueling. And what are some of the things that refuel and repair us that we don't want to do? Well, the number one of those is exercise. I just am absolutely certain that you cannot be a resilient professional caregiver without doing regular aerobic activity. I am certain of that. Sucks, but it's just true. And as we're learning more and more and more about how you get rid of cortisol, you got to burn it, and that what exercise does with mitigating the threat response, man, it's just essential. It's just essential. Now, here's what's cool. You don't have to do very much. As little as 1 hour a week produces 22 benefits: less depression, better sleep, less anxiety, better relational functioning. I mean, it's just across the board. There's all kinds of research that has demonstrated that 1 hour a week, 20 minutes a time, split into 3 segments of getting heart rate to aerobic level. For most of us, that's 110 beats a minute. Well, that's a brisk 1 mile walk 3 times a week. That's not a very high tax, but you get a lot of benefits from it. And of course, the more you do, the better benefits you get, up to a point, and then it drops off and then starts to cause harm. But you got to go a long way into doing a lot of exercise before it starts not being useful. So mostly more exercise is better. It is the single most important self-care skill, even more important than chocolate, is aerobic activity. And it's stuff like preventative medicine, getting checkups, getting dental care, having a therapist or somebody, a spiritual advisor that we're meeting with, that, you always kind of cringe a little bit about, I don't really want to go, but you go and you feel a whole lot better about yourself. It's those activities that sustain, not the indulgent and avoidant activities. So in your manual, I put together on page 67 and 68, a self-care and revitalization worksheet. Adapted it from Risking Connection, which is Karen Sock-Vitney. You may know her as the co-author of Trauma and the Therapist, with Laurie Perlman. Here's Laurie Perlman, their work with vicarious trauma. And this is a self-care really assessment. And what it's designed to do is to generate ideas for you to do to enhance your self-care. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to take 2 minutes, 3 minutes, stop the video, and just go through and check, assign a number to each one of these items. 0, never; 1, rarely; 2, sometimes; 3, often; 4, frequently. And just put a number beside each one of these, and you see that there are 5 subheadings of physical self-care, psychological self-care, emotional self-care, spiritual self-care, and workplace or professional self-care, and then space for others. And once you've completed all of the assessment, look it over, and I'm going to ask you to pick one item and circle that one item from each of the subheadings that you, over the next month, are going to intentionally move up a tick, from rarely to sometimes, or from sometimes to often, or from often to frequently. That you are going to, just in the smallest movement you can make forward in doing it more frequently, I'm going to ask you to pick 5 different things. 1 under physical, 1 under psychological, 1 under emotional, 1 under spiritual, and 1 under workplace or professional self-care. And just circle those items. And take a couple of minutes to do that. And then when you're done with that, then start back the video and we'll finish this up. So we have now explored 5 different resilience skills that in 11 different empirical studies have demonstrated the diminishing of symptoms and the enhancing of both professional resilience and professional quality of life by intentionally implementing and developing some discipline around practicing these. So let me walk through these a little bit with you. So step 1, care for yourself. Put your walking shoes on 3 times a week or more and walk or run. At least 1 mile 3 times a week. Engage spiritual connection in whatever that is for you, whether that's in nature, whether that's in religious practices, whether that's in spiritual practices, whatever that is, grow those. Find a creative outlet and engage creatively. Get good sleep. Eat healthy. That's the basic stuff that you hear at workshops, and it's all. And the reason why you hear it is because it works. And then with that done, connect once a month or so with somebody in a soulful, real, connected way, in a transparent and vulnerable way, not perfunctory, not just social stuff, not grousing, but to build and connect in ways that are soulful and real and that feel satisfying for you. 3, evolve your perceptions. Attend to what you control and be in acceptance with the rest. Remain at choice rather than, watch how frequently you use the language, I have to, and evolve that into I choose to. Move out of the need for validation from others into making that between you and your God or you and your higher self, that you don't need, although it feels good when you get it, that you are no longer playing to the audience to try to get from them some validation, that you are instead acting from the place of your own integrity. Keep coming back to neuroception that you are not in danger right now, even though you are perceiving threat, and that you are going to remain optimistic instead of capitulating to dreadful. Those are all perceptions that you can evolve and mature. And when you do all of those things, then what you've done is that you've made your workplace and your life a lot less toxic. Become intentional. Go to work tomorrow or whenever you go back to work with your with the focus of what mission am I engaging? Am I in pursuit of while I'm at work? And what principles do I want to live by while I'm at work? And start to discover the places that you are habitually breaching those and bring those into alignment by relaxing your body and continuing to keep your mission and code of honor. I suggest you print it out and put it in a frame, or I have mine sitting in a frame beside my desk, and I see it every day. And then finally, stop squeezing. Scan your body for muscle tension and release that tension. And getting that up into triple digits initially, but then evolving that into higher and higher and higher more frequently, so that just every 2 or 3 or 5 minutes you're checking in and interrupting your threat response. Then what will happen is your life will get so good you'll have to screw it up to stand to live in it. Is that things get really good for you as you begin to practice more and more and more self-regulation. So the last activity, what I want to invite you to do is in your manual on page 69 and 70 is a self-directed compassion fatigue resilience plan. And those things that I just went through, each one of them has a heading, a little bit of language about it, and it invites you to identify a way, a method that you're going to employ to relax your body and to maintain self-regulation. Intentionality, find a couple of places that you are in breach and that you're going to approach over the next week with bringing those transgressions into intention. Identifying a couple of places that you can address each of the below: choice versus demand, process versus outcome, relinquishing entitlement, maintaining integrity, and shifting from other to self-validation. Identifying some of those contexts. 3 people in your life that you can step to over the next couple of weeks to invite them to become part of a support network. And then finally, identifying, just transferring from the worksheet onto this page, what's one aerobic activity you can do 3 times over the next week, and then physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, professional. And integrative means things which are both skills development and play. That encaptures both of that: a musical instrument, golfing, going to the golf range, and playing the game. Things which use both hemispheres of the brain. I forgot to talk about those integrative activities that are both play and structure. Apollo and Dionysus. And would ask that you take 5 minutes to complete this. You can stop the video and complete this. And then when you're done, or if you want to do it later, then you can come on back and join me. So my hope is that as you've sat through this presentation, that this quote's taken on a little bit richer and deeper meaning for you. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, and in our response lies both our growth and our freedom. I'd like to remind every one of you that if there's ever any way that I can be of service to you in the performance of your mission of being of service to people who are traumatized, suffering, or addicted, it would be my privilege to do so. I invite you to test and see whether or not that's true. I welcome you to reach out to me if you want to deepen your practice around any of this material or learn how to deliver it to others. I welcome your contact, email or phone, or however else you want to be in touch with me. And I just want to say one more thing, that many of you watching this have been of service to people for decades. And it's cost you. Many of you watching this have suffered relational issues, lost marriages, lost relationships because you've continued to do this work. Many of you have found yourselves having physical and emotional symptoms as a result of giving care to others. And some of you significantly. And yet, you've kept doing it. You've continued to show back up the next day. You've heard yourself say in your head, some of you out loud to other people, I can't do this anymore. And yet you come back and you do it again. A lot of you watching this video have been the person that has shown up in the lives of people for whom nobody else shows up for. That you've answered the calls at 2 o'clock in the morning, that you've shown up in the ER, that you have been the last hope of people who are ready to kill themselves. And because you have continued to show up and continued to perform your mission, even when you didn't want to, even when it was hurting you, yet you continued to stay with honor and fidelity to that mission, even when it looked bleak. You stayed the course. Because you've done that, I want you to know that there are hundreds of people around you in your immediate vicinity, in your town, that because you have intervened in their lives when they were at a desperate place, they are alive today because of your intervention. Hundreds of those people. Tens for each one of you, hundreds for everybody. There's scores for individually. That you've saved their lives physically. They would be dead today had you not been there to intervene for them. There are hundreds of people in your vicinity and beyond who, because you engage with them using all of your charm and your manipulative capacity and your Machiavellian ability and just tricking and supporting and loving and doing everything that you could do and not giving up. I'm one of those people. Then there are over 100 people in your life that because you've shown up in theirs, that do not have a spike in their arm today, are not in prison, are not turning tricks out on the street. They are right now in pursuit of their dreams. And you gave them that. If not for you, they wouldn't be there. And there are thousands of people who are living a better quality life because you intervened in their lives or the lives of one of their loved ones. I want you to know that it's working. I want you to know that you're changing the world. And man, all I got to do is look out and watch the news this week and to see the work that we've done beginning to bear some fruit of the changing of the consciousness of human spirit is happening right now. It's cool. And what would be a really beautiful thing is that if you turned this thing on, this thing was over and there was a knock at your door and all of the 4,820 people's lives who you made better were waiting for you outside with hugs and kisses and confetti and cookies, and they could tell you in person how valuable, what a difference that you've made in their lives. God, I wish every one of you could get that. But you know what? You're never going to get it. That's not ever coming. But the gift that I'd like to give you at the end of this is I'd like to invite my spirit and my soul and my presence and every single person whose life that you have touched and made better. I'd like to invite them to use me right now to tell you the most important thing that I have to the most important thing for you to hear during this whole presentation. And that is thank you. Thank you for the service to my family, to my community, to my country, and my world. You've made it a better place to live. And I am grateful for the contributions that you've made. That's all I have. Thank you very much. Here is my contact information that I'll leave up there for a couple minutes while folks are, while this is closing out in the credits. And I invite you to reach out and contact me if there's any way that I can be of service to you.